But I guess if I were to say, if there's one thing that people don't really understand about the podcast or don't know behind the scenes, I guess I'd just say the logistics of it. I think, yeah, if some people knew like the panicked moments that I've had behind the scenes to be like, okay, I gotta save this thing, that would be the biggest thing, for sure.
Welcome to DAM, the official podcast of Northwest Hydropower. And for those listening closely, you will recognize that this is not Austin Rohr. This is Victor Valerio, and I am joined by my co-host, Clark Mather, for what we hope will be a special episode of the podcast. And who are we interviewing? None other than the host, creator, and producer of the DAM podcast, Austin Rohr.
Yeah, Victor, this was your idea, and it's a really great one. Austin's done an awesome job hosting the podcast for, I think, more than 3 years now, 50 plus episodes, I think 53 to be exact. And while I'm not sure that this will be easier for Austin than hosting the podcast, we want to give our listeners a chance to learn about our fearless host, Austin Rohr.
Austin, how does it feel to be on this side of the mic?
It's interesting. Sometimes you think about whether or not you're one day going to find yourself in this position, but you never really know, right? And so it's fun to have this come to life. It's really, I think, special for both of you to come up with the idea, to have gone the extra mile, write the questions, do the intro, everything like that. So I'm just excited. I'm really curious, and normally I don't get to get as off script on these things. I've got a pretty tight deal to follow, so the fact that it'll be a little bit more free-flowing, I think will give people an interesting perspective, not so much on myself, but I guess just my work and what we do here at the organization. So yeah, looking forward to it. Let's bring it on.
At the very least, it'll be entertaining, right?
I hope so.
Austin, we have crowdsourced some of these questions today, so hopefully you have prepared. But we aren't going to recreate the format of the podcast. So following your lead, we typically want to get to know our guests. So tell us more about yourself to start. In the first episode of DAM, you talked about telling the untold stories of Northwest Hydropower. So now it's your turn. Tell us the untold stories of Austin Rohr. Who was Austin before Northwest RiverPartners?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and it really depends on how far back you want to go. But I know a lot of our guests talk about going through college before getting into their career and all that. So I guess maybe I'll just start off there. And actually, it comes up a bit in, all of us have speaker bios. So when we go out and we do presentations, we are asked to provide a brief biography that somebody can read off before they introduce us, and we can give our presentation, which, by the way, is like, it feels to me like a humiliation ritual, because you have to sit there and listen to someone read off your accolades, and it just makes me cringe every single time. But typically what's been in those bios for a long time has mentioned these Washington State High School Radio Awards that I won. And that really, I think, is not only the start of how I got into the podcast, but really what drove me into the career that I ended up in. I was actually on a flight to Clark's favorite place on earth, Pullman, really to Spokane, to then drive down to Pullman to go visit WSU for the weekend. And totally out of coincidence, the guy sitting directly across the aisle on the airplane was a teacher at my school who I'd never met before at the high school. By this time, I was already in running start, so I wasn't taking classes at the high school anymore. But he ran the radio program. He taught classes on radio as kind of a extracurricular class you could sign up for. And I was looking for a senior project. And he's like, you should just come stop by. Like, just, next time you're at the school, just drop in. These are my hours where I don't have any classes going on. Come swing by and see me, and, we can see about getting you set up. And so next thing you know, I started doing my senior project, so to speak, which was I worked at the radio. There was about an hour in the afternoon where there was pretty much blank space again. I don't remember what it was called exactly, but it was basically like his homeroom time, right? Where, he just had an empty afternoon hour. People could come in and out, ask him questions. And so he set me up in the radio in the back. I recruited one of my good friends at the time, and we just did a little radio show there. It barely broadcast outside of Purdy, Washington, where my high school was. But we had a lot of fun doing it. And then separately, also just set me up on one of the computers out back. It was actually on a Mac using GarageBand, which is, for folks that don't know, what we still use to do the podcast today. Not the most advanced software, but I learned how to use it. And I basically just sat there and played around. I read scripts off, did things like that. And he kind of gave me all these mock stories to cover. I mean, they were real stories, but it was like, hey, just write me a 30-second recap of the football game from last night. And he'd bring me the scores and some of the highlights of the game, and then just let me put the script together, record it, add music, do all that kind of stuff. And so I was just, writing these, submitting them to him, all that kind of stuff. He never told me that he had submitted them for awards. And next thing I know, towards the end of the year, I come in and he's like, oh, by the way, like, these are yours, and just handed me these little plaques. But at that point, I really felt like communications was kind of speaking to me on a broader scale. Obviously, all the radio recording stuff was part of that. And when I got into UW-Tacoma, where I went to college, I was taking a lot of classes that are required for a communications degree, and they were media classes. So they're describing the difference between being a journalist and doing public affairs. And I was just sitting there listening to them talk about what journalists have to do on a day-to-day basis. And I was like, I don't think that that's me at all. Having to go out and really chase stories and pursue things. And I wasn't the type of person that I felt like I was going to go confront random people and, try and really chase leads all the time like that. It seemed a little bit just not my character. So I really was interested in doing public affairs. And I obviously, as you all know, have a little bit of a family history with utilities and all the background in hydropower and things like that. And so, I kept thinking, like, I could see myself doing public affairs for a utility, doing something like that. That's how I eventually ended up getting an internship at Tacoma Public Utilities, where I met Clark for the first time. And I know we talked a little bit about that story on his podcast. But when I got out of college, I had a really hard time finding a job. One of the things nobody really explained to me and I didn't really understand or pick up on was that when you get out of college, when you graduate, if you've done, only a 10-week internship and you're applying for entry-level positions, a lot of people want you to have more experience than that already. And a lot of them want you to have built that experience through something like an internship. And I just had nothing to show for it on paper. It's like, hey, I got a degree, right? But I was having a really hard time. I think I spent probably about 10 months looking for a job. I ended up working at a place called Fastenal. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but, not at all a career job, anything like that. I was just basically sorting through screws and bolts and nuts in the back. And at that time, just kind of making ends meet, doing what I need to do. I went down to visit my best friend who had moved to Escondido, California. And one of the things that we were really passionate about was motocross, supercross, the whole racing world. We grew up riding and racing ourselves. And there was a race that weekend that we kind of planned this trip around. Like, I'm going to go visit him. We're going to go to San Diego Supercross, hang out for the day, enjoy the event, all that. And I went down there. There's this thing for folks listening, for you guys. There's this thing when you go to one of those events where you can pay for an extra pass and you can go into what they call the pits. And so that's where all the teams, all the trucks are parked. You can go down there and you can see everything up close. You can see, the bikes, the riders, all the staff, everything. And so we're walking around, hanging out down there. And as I'm kind of going through the crowd, I see this guy off to my right, and I recognize, like, oh, I know who that is because I've seen him in videos. I've seen his magazines and stuff like that. That's the editor-in-chief for this magazine called Transworld Motocross. And here I am. I've got nothing going for me right now. I'm working at this Fastenal place, and it's not going to hurt me to ask if he's got any advice for getting a career. So I go up to him, I introduce myself, I shake my hand, and I just say, I'm looking for pointers. Like, if somebody wanted to work and do journalism in this industry, what would it take, right? It's kind of like the pie in the sky, big dream job. And his name's Don. Don gives me no advice whatsoever. He doesn't, he completely skips the question, doesn't answer at all. He goes, actually, I've got a managing editor position open right now, and if you think you're a good writer, you're welcome to apply for it. And I chat with him a little bit, and he's like, a lot of people that come up to me and talk to me, they want to work in this industry. They can take photos and they can shoot videos, but they don't know how to write. He's like, they write like they're in elementary school. And what I need is someone who can write. And so if you can show me that your writing is good, that's what'll really make the difference. And he's like, I don't care that you went to college. I've met plenty of people who have college degrees that aren't worth anything to me. So prove to me that you can write. We go through this back and forth process. I write a couple of mock race reports, things like that, submit it to him. He likes what he sees. He flies me down to California, and that's when I get kind of confronted by the higher ups at this place. So at the time, the magazine was part of what they call the Enthusiast Network. That was owned by the Discovery Channel. So basically, you have these different levels of higher up executives that you kind of go up the ladder with. So the editor-in-chief of the magazine, really at the end of the day, he's got his 6-8 staff, but that's all he's in charge of. He's still got to answer to all the people above him. And when I go in for that interview, the guy's like, I don't think you understand how difficult this job will be for you. This will be the hardest thing you ever do. I don't see that you have experience that gives me any confidence that you can do the job.
Wow, that's inspiring.
Right. But if Don really believes he can give you a shot, but just understand what you're walking into. And lo and behold, I ended up getting the position. I worked there for 2 years. It was an absolute blast, but it wasn't hard in the way that I thought it was going to be difficult. The writing was easy. Doing even the race coverage, flying all over the place, getting to go to all these different events, interview, people that I had grown up looking up to, and now you have to stick a camera in their face, sometimes on their worst night, frankly. That part wasn't difficult, but the schedule was such a grind. You had no weekends, you had no freedom. I always told people I couldn't go do things like go watch a movie, because you never know when you're going to get the call that there's something going on the production side of a magazine, on the print side, and you need to fix it. It needs to be dealt with right away, because if you miss a deadline, you're going to get fined, potentially tens of thousands of dollars. And so it turned into a thing where my laptop went everywhere with me. I put it in a backpack. I threw it in the back of my truck, and wherever I went, I always knew I had to be plugged in. I could not be unplugged from things. And that got really difficult. So this story is well documented out there. I'm not going to go into great detail, but flash forward almost exactly 2 years, the company gets acquired by American Media. They're the ones that run the National Enquirer. And the day of the purchase, they call us all in for a meeting. They sit us down in a room not much bigger than this with the new executives. They basically say, hey, just so you know, we're going a different direction. All of you are terminated effective immediately. Wow. Your accounts will lock out in 30 minutes. Wow. So anything that you need, get it off your device, get it off whatever. At that 30 minutes, we'll come collect your devices, and then stick around until the end of the day, and we'll give you your severance packages and send you on your way. And at that point, I was like, I don't even want to be here anymore. I liked what I did for work. I liked the people that I worked with, but I was ready to move on from California. I was ready to come back home to the Northwest, be closer to family. And I was just, it was like I had done the dream job, and it wasn't all that it really lived up to be in my head. And I thought, I can't see myself doing this for the rest of my career. And so that's how I ended up here. And, that story as well, meeting Kurt, everything I think has been talked about on the podcast before. But again, just kind of stumbled into it a little bit, had a very offhand conversation that turned into a job offer. And now here I am at RiverPartners, and it's been the best 7 years I could ask for.
Yeah, that's really great. And I think it's worth revisiting that journey again, even though I know you talked about this in some of the earlier podcasts. Even the first podcast, you talked about your meeting Kurt and getting connected. But a couple things just to follow up. So one, do you want to give a shout out to that teacher who sent your radio story in and got you the award?
Yeah, I don't even know if he's still there. He might have retired by now, but his name is Mr. Smith, Leland Smith. Fantastic guy. Really, really phenomenal to work with. Unfortunately, I believe the radio program actually got cut from the school's budget in the last 2 or 3 years. It was a pretty recent development, but it was a fantastic thing for me to experience. Really shaped my career.
Well, you're keeping it alive.
In some form or fashion, yeah.
I was just thinking about how you mentioned the schedule being hard, especially being connected all the time. I mean, you're a pretty outdoorsy person. You've talked to me about, hiking, fishing. I can imagine like having to be connected to, some type of signal.
Yeah.
That probably became a real, I don't want to say issue, but it would interfere with daily life for sure, especially again for an outdoorsy person like you.
That was tough, yeah. And when you factor into, Southern California, it's got its own outdoorsy scene, but when you're from this area, when you're from, Western Washington, it's kind of hard to compare. You can't. I used to feel I would describe myself as feeling claustrophobic. People are like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Well, it doesn't matter what direction you point yourself. You cannot, within a reasonable distance, drive anywhere and find something green." Right? It's desert as far as the eye can see in every direction. And, just wanting to experience a little bit of this every now and then, you don't really have that option available to you.
Yeah. It is a great part about the Northwest and part of the job that you get to do now, which we'll talk about. Now, we did do some research and have several sources for this podcast. We understand that there may be some videos of you driving around on quads in Pierce County with music dubbed in. It sounds like you were doing production on quad races much earlier than even radio in high school. But we'll set that story aside. What we do want to know is you didn't talk about your experience as a lifeguard and how that might have impacted your role here at Northwest RiverPartners. Can you confirm that you were a lifeguard, and how has that impacted your work?
I did retire. I did retire from duty. I love to always joke about that. Yeah, I was a lifeguard in high school. Started at 16. I think I did it for 3.5 years, roughly, at the YMCA, and it's one of those, I don't think that the job itself really led to anything that was monumental as far as my own experience now. I don't take a lot of lessons from standing on the side of a pool for 5+ hours and staring at nothing. Nothing ever really monumental happened when I was watching the patrons of the YMCA.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of those jobs. It's like a lot of things. You do have a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. If something serious happens, you're the first person to respond to a medical emergency. Actually, again, nothing ever happened, but there was a time where I think it was only 5 minutes after I clocked out, somebody had a heart attack.
Oh, wow.
And so if I'd been there 5 minutes later, I would have been responding to that situation.
Yeah.
So what I heard is nobody died on his watch.
That's correct. Yeah, I have a clean record.
Exactly.
The thing that I think was really just eye-opening, though, was how some people were really, you have a bunch of teenagers doing this job. Some people were really irresponsible at that time. And I think it just impressed upon me, like, sometimes you have to remember, hey, you're here, again, potentially to be in the position of saving someone's life. You should probably take that pretty seriously.
Yeah.
Recognize, the moment that you're in. Just because 99% of the time you have the most boring job that I think I could possibly imagine doesn't mean that other 1% of the time is not going to happen. And actually, the thing that doesn't show up in a resume is after I had stopped being a lifeguard, I was at a local lake. Clark, you may know where I'm talking about, Crescent Lake in Gig Harbor.
Yeah.
I was out there just floating around on a summer day, enjoying the summer weather, and almost kind of across the lake on the other side there was a bunch of yelling and commotion. And it turned out that there was a kid who had basically worn himself out. I say a kid, I was only 18 years old, 19 years old. He was probably 14, something like that. But basically just ran out of energy. And there's nowhere you can touch the bottom. There's no shore. So he's really trying to keep himself afloat, and his friends are trying to keep himself afloat. They're yelling for help. And there were people on kayaks. Like, there were other people closer to him that could have responded to that situation, but everyone just kind of stared. And so I hopped off the little thing I was floating on, and I swam all the way across. I used one of the, rescue strokes that they teach you as a lifeguard, pulled him all the way back to the other side of the lake, put him on somebody's dock, and just said, if there's anything else you need, whatever. The only reason I ever bring up the story is the only time I ever performed any kind of rescue in the water. But shortly after that, I was like, I'm done for, once you've saved somebody in a lake, you're like, I don't think this is really the relaxing time. So I was like, I'm going to pack up and head out. And it was before phones were waterproof, and I dropped my phone in the lake and completely fried it in an instant. And there was, the rice trick, none of that worked. And so I always joke about that as like the time that I learned that karma doesn't exist.
Well, hopefully karma's got a bigger plan for you in terms of payback. So that's pretty impressive, Austin. I didn't know that story about you. Thanks for sharing all that. So we've kind of left off when you got to Northwest RiverPartners, and wondering if you can talk about that journey. I mean, we've been around for 20 years. You're the longest tenured employee. You've been here for more than a third of the time the organizations existed. Can you talk about how you got to Northwest RiverPartners, and what have you noticed about working here?
Yeah, I mean, the journey of getting here itself, like I said, pretty straightforward. It really evolved quickly from a coffee shop conversation with Kurt to a job offer. But I would say the first summer of 2019 that we were both here, we were so fresh to this. We were sitting in this room that we're in right now. Both of our desks were in here. And, the funniest thing to look back on is that I remember one day Kurt turned around and he looked at me and he said, there's this thing that, as I'm learning about this organization that our members keep bringing up, and it's these lower Snake River dams. And he goes, I really need to get to the bottom of whether or not that's something that we want to tackle. Is that something that we want to support those projects? Is that something we don't? I mean, I don't want to say we came in here clueless. I don't want to give, any disservice to Kurt, but certainly for me, outside of kind of knowing what a dam is, understanding the river here in our backyard, I just didn't really know. I had no reference point for the kind of work that this organization was going to do, would need to do, anything like that. And so we just spent a ton of time doing research. One of the big things that we heard coming in, people were really concerned about the accuracy of information that was being shared. And again, no disservice either to Terry Flores, who was here originally, but people would often cite the fact that there was op-eds that would come out all the time. Sometimes the tone of those op-eds would be too divisive. The facts that were in them didn't always line up with what people felt was accurate at the time. And so we just felt it was so imperative to make sure that we were 100% on point. We knew everything we needed to know to talk about these things and talk about them comfortably. And we wanted to make sure that we were approaching this in a way that was ultimately collaborative. That was such a big, important piece early on, is making sure that we could go out and we could work with people that didn't always see eye to eye. And I think, if you flash forward to today, one of the things that I think we've really been able to pride ourselves on is the fact that we've got such great information, great resources, really strongly supported facts. And those things also, for me personally, helped inform my own positions on these things a lot of the way. And I would say that that's been an important development for me sitting in this seat. Is I didn't come into this with a bias. I didn't have a preconceived notion. I could have come in here and, as you look around, you see like the fish poster that I have brought in personally that sits on the wall here. I came into this with an interest in fish and wildlife. Ultimately, that was the thing. I love the outdoors, like you mentioned, Victor. I like fishing. I like nature. The power side of it really wasn't the thing that drew me to the job initially, but my interest in it, my fascination with it, my passion for continuing to advocate for it has just been formed by informing myself ultimately. And so, yeah, I would say that's, as part of the journey, that's been the biggest thing. Getting out, talking to real people in the world, doing that research, informing myself, understanding, what's fact, what's fiction. That's really been the thing that has ultimately put me in a place where now, I feel really strongly about what we do, and, unshakably so.
Anything surprise you along the way?
I think you'll kind of laugh at this. I think one of the biggest surprises for me has been how difficult it's been to get people interested in what we do. Because I came into it doing media and communications when I started here. The magazine that I worked at beforehand had just about 2 million followers on Facebook. Just huge social media presence. You post something, it's going to get hundreds of thousands of likes. You come here where there's no social media accounts that existed for this organization. And I thought, well, if we show people the behind the scenes, if we, really put some cool stuff out there, I think that'll really work. And at least at the time, things have evolved so much from the 2020 election and COVID, where algorithms just don't perform the way that they did. But there was a time where you could really understand, as long as I post something in this format, something with this color palette, I make it really interesting, that's going to get picked up. And it didn't ever really work the way that I had envisioned. Now, granted, I think that we've gotten ourselves to a place where we're competitive. We're on point with a lot of other organizations like ourselves, organizations on both sides of the issue even. But finding a huge audience to really care about this, I realize is a little bit more difficult than I thought it was going to be. And now that I'm in the job, I actually think my expectations are much more realistic. But I had kind of grandiose visions of what I thought was maybe possible. It's always good to reach for the stars and aspire for more. But I without being disparaging to hydropower, I would say it's a little bit harder to get people interested in technical policy issues or, feats of engineering than it is to show people a backflip on a dirt bike with flames in the background. It's just, it's the nature of it.
So looking back at your first year, is there anything you would have done a little bit differently?
First year, I don't know that I would say so. I feel like we got off the ground so well. Right off the bat, got to go to some of the really good conferences that there were. Again, just spent so much time digesting things. I do really feel like we set ourselves up in a great position. I don't say that to sound overly, I don't want it to come across egotistical. I'm sure there's always things you can do better. But when I look back, I feel like that was a really good time. If anything, I would say, maybe during COVID would have been the time where it would have been doing things a little bit differently. it's hard, right? Because that was such a chaotic time for everybody, but it felt like our world got put on pause. I mean, so much of what we do is people, right? It's going out and talking to people in the public. It's visiting our members. And when you take that opportunity away, it feels like so much of our purpose gets stripped away with it. And I don't know, on the one hand, I don't know what we could have done differently. Those in-person interactions they weren't something you could really make happen. But it felt like it took a while to kind of get back into the groove of what this organization really means because of the effect that COVID had on us.
I agree on that. Well, actually, you know what? I'm curious. What's something that you think maybe people completely misunderstand about what we do?
Yeah, I think you guys will appreciate this answer. I ran into a former coworker of mine, and at the time, I think this was it would have been last year, because it was right after my first trip back to DC, right before going back the second time. And, I just kind of casually brought that up in conversation, like, oh yeah, like, busy schedule lately, doing all this back and forth and everything. And he kind of got the impression, and I use this example for a lot of other people that I've talked to, but he kind of got the impression, he's like, oh, like you guys are, you must be doing like lobbying or something. And it was like, I think that people, when they hear some of our activities, they really think that we're much more in the sort of like, they have the evil connotation of like people that lobby and do things, and like they go in and they make it so that, you hear about all the time with like pharmaceuticals or with food or things like that, where people are like, oh, we really want this like common sense thing passed, and these people go in and they block it because it's bad for business and it makes, the experience of everyday people worse. And I think what we do is, so fundamentally different from that like I hate to even associate it with that, right? It's like we're going in, we're advocating for the best interest of people. And I think it's really important to convey that and, make sure that, especially when you go to a community event, when you go to talk to somebody at a, local club or community organization, it's like, we want to tell you the story of hydropower, but we also want your story so that we can go tell that to somebody who's going to make a difference.
Yeah, I like that.
We're not going in, I guess another piece of it, it's kind of tied to it, but a lot of people like to say, oh, you do work for the power companies. And I cringe, even when I say up front, like, public utility, blah, 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 they're like, oh yeah, the power company. And I'm like, well, no. I mean, especially having myself worked for, again, a giant corporation like we talked about earlier, to being here at a nonprofit, the way that a corporate structure works versus the way that a public utility works is so vastly different. And both models have their place. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with private power, private utilities versus public utilities, but when people kind of infer that like, oh yeah, they're just out for themselves, they just want to make money, it's like, well, no, they're providing a public service. And by the way, that public service, you have a say in. I don't know if you notice when you drive around Clark County, for example, you'll see signs up for commissioner positions that are elected positions. Anybody could run for those.
Right.
I mean, I really think it's important to make sure people don't misconstrue what a public utility is, because it's really, really important for people to understand. And again, we're not out there, trying, and the same thing, by the way, goes for Bonneville. A lot of people think that the dams, again, they see the big dams on the river. They don't think about federal agencies. They think about somebody trying to make money. Even, they hear Bonneville and they think that that's like a money-making organization. And it's like, they are managing this for the public good, for the public interest. The story of those projects is incredible in terms of, the feats of public works to pull us out of the depression, to provide rural electrification. I think that lumping that in with kind of just a private sector money-making business is just disingenuous to the story of this region.
Yeah. Well, and you do such a great job with the podcast bringing those stories to life. We have ports that we represent that are elected by people. We have farmers that are literally just people out doing their jobs. And so we're sitting here in the damn podcast studio that you've created and had more than 50 interviews in. Take us behind the scenes in the podcast. What's something we wouldn't know that goes into making a podcast?
Yeah, I think it's a tough question to answer. I mean, only because for me it feels like such a practice thing now. But I guess if I were to say, it's like, oh yeah, the guy on the other end, he forgot something or he screwed something up. But I make sure to make it right and do what I need to do so that I'm not going to that person and be like, hey, can we record that whole conversation again? Because, as you know, it's really difficult. I've shared publicly on the podcast, so it's not a hidden thing, but it's really difficult to find the time. You got to go through a whole process of onboarding somebody, making sure that they're totally comfortable in the process, that they are comfortable with what's going to be asked of them. Some people are like, bring it on, right? They just want to jump in and do it. But other people, it's like, I need to know what I'm going to be asked. I need to make sure that all these things are just right, because they're, at the end of the day, they don't want to get themselves in trouble in their jobs, which I completely respect. But on the flip side of it, like, once we get that thing set up, once we've recorded it, that's my job at that point, to make sure that everything goes smoothly past that. And yeah, it's as simple as like, you can hit the wrong button on one of these things.
Yeah.
And you look over, 20, 30 minutes in and you're like, oh shoot, like this is not working right. But I've found various tricks. I won't get into all that, but I found ways to persevere, again, save those pieces of audio, fix them, make it so that I don't have to go to that person and try and start from scratch all over again. And I think, if some people knew like the panicked moments that I've had behind the scenes, to be like, okay, I got to save this thing, that would be the biggest thing, for sure.
Well, I will say thank you. I know we're very grateful to have you here, because I know when this idea came up about, let's interview Austin. I mean, that's, again, the idea came to me. It was great. Let's talk about it. And about 2 weeks ago, I think I messaged you. I'm like, hey, Austin, you're going to help us edit this, right? And set this up, because I don't know how to operate anything. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
So you mentioned just rolling with the punches. I mean, any funny stories that you want to share?
Yeah, I've tried to mostly keep us from having disruptions or funny business during the podcast. There have been 2 incidents that I can recall. One of them I was just sharing with you guys before this, and I'm sure people at home have never heard me say this before, but our podcast studio, right, it's just my office. We just have a space set up to do this here. And we have these giant windows that, for people listening at home, pick up a ton of light. They're south facing, so they get sunlight all day. They especially get sunlight really heavy in the winter because the sun is low. It's like sitting in a greenhouse when you don't have the air conditioning on. But our air conditioner is a little bit old. Apologies to the folks upstairs at NWPPA, but air conditioning equipment's a little bit behind the times. It comes on blaringly loud, and it will ruin your podcast like that. There's probably a few episodes out there that I can think of where there's been some air conditioning audio in them. Others, I found ways to get it removed. But as a best practice, I turn the air conditioning off when we record. I was in here one day by myself. I had that air conditioning off in the wintertime where that sun was really low. And as the podcast is going on, there's not a ton of pressure on me, but I'm always a little bit more high strung during those things because you're just trying to make sure everything's right. And pretty soon, like, my face is just getting hot.
Yeah.
I can tell because I'm looking at myself.
It's warm in here.
I'm looking at myself on Zoom in this instance, so my face is turning bright red on the camera. And I'm starting to feel sweat kind of beating up on my forehead. We finally wrap this thing up, and I'm super grateful when it's over. And I go back there and look at the thermostat, and it's at like 85 degrees.
Yeah, that's
warm.
warm.
I just cooked myself. Like, I felt like a dog in a hot car. So that's definitely one of them. The other one that I think is really funny is I was recording, and I hate to say it, but I can't remember who I was recording with. But I always tell people, we record in advance, so we can hit pause, we can redo, we can all these kinds of things. And we're like 45 minutes into this thing, and his phone goes off on his desk. He's a general manager at a utility. And he's like, hey, like, we just had an outage. I gotta hop off and deal with this. And so we had like 15 minutes where just podcast off, everything like that. And I'm starting to think, like, I don't know. I mean, this might just not happen at this point. Finally comes back. The guy, flawlessly, just like picked up on the question, was like, remembered the question perfectly, picked up on it, provided almost exact same, like, word for word response, and then just we continued through that recording like nothing happened. I went in and I spliced that little 15-minute dead space out. Podcast went off without a hitch. But, like, sitting back here, you're like, oh man, again, we went through all this work, and now I don't know that this is going to happen, and we've got like 2/3 of a podcast done. So, but other than that, I think everything's been pretty smooth sailing. Again, I try and keep it, I want to make sure that when people come on this podcast, the experience is good. And that's always really important for me, because their impression of this organization, of myself, of everything that we do here could really go sideways if it's a bad experience.
Yeah, thank you. You've done a great job with it.
Yeah, I know. I feel very comfortable when I got to be in the podcast, as well as, the flip side, right? I was receiving the questions, but I know one of my first concerns was, Austin, you can edit this, right? Like, sometimes I rant or my mouth goes faster than my head. I'm like, oh, wait, did I say that? Anyways, well, we are getting to a point where I want to hear a little more about your new role. When I came in, which it was about a year ago, you were already our Deputy Executive Director. Can you tell us a little bit about what the biggest adjustment was, or how your day-to-day has become different from your previous position to now?
It's a great question. I think the thing for me that one of the things I enjoy the most is I feel like I get out more. It's really nice to get out to go talk to more people, do more presentations. I just think that social network building aspect of it has been really fantastic, and it's good experience for me because I was just talking to Amy, our new staff member here this morning. One of the things that was really tough initially is there were a few presentation slots in the interim after Kurt had left, before you had started, Clark, that we had to fill those spots. And I hadn't really done any public presentations up to that point. I had a slide deck that he had put together, but I hadn't presented it myself. And so there was a lot of questions and doubt for me, frankly, of like, do I really remember all the information? Am I going to know what I'm talking about? Is this, this could be a total disaster, right? But I went out, I gave the presentation, I had a ton of notes in there, and I really relied heavily on those notes, but I got through it, and I felt really good about how it went. But then the next couple of presentations, the way that the AV was set up, I couldn't see those notes. And I was a little bit panicked going into it, a little bit of nervousness of like, can I do this without having something to rely on to reference? But now being in this role specifically, where that's sort of a regular part of the job, it's helped me to the point where now, just in conversation, if I get a question at a booth or just being out, somewhere in public representing myself in this role, I feel like I can have a really strong conversation. I can cite those facts and the sources they came from off the top of my head. And I think without that practice, I wouldn't have developed as much as I have. And so I think this role has been fantastic in the sense that it's pushed me to be better at what I do, to be sharper. And then I would also say, too, I feel like I talk about the Northwest Power and Conservation Council all the time, but one of the big pieces of this role was jumping in right at the start of the Fish and Wildlife amendment process that we just went through. And for me, doing the homework on that to go through what I would describe as a really heavy policy document. I think it was 180 pages in the draft, and it'll be over 200 by the time that they've written all the appendix sections and everything comes out later this year. But having to jump in, understand all of that, digest all of that, turn it into something that not only we could respond to, but also that our members, people in the general public could participate in, that they knew what to actually comment on, what to say, what to respond to. It's a lot of work. It's a lot to keep up on. It definitely changed. My understanding changed through the process. Things that I thought I knew, I ended up learning a lot more about and learning that maybe I didn't know so well. But I think that has been also really rewarding to go through that process and to just go all in on something that was completely outside of my wheelhouse. And I just think it's funny, if you were to go back and talk to some of the folks that I used to work with when I was at that magazine, for example, and try and explain like what this thing is that I'm working on now. I mean, you would never guess that a guy who is writing in a motocross magazine is going to be trying to steer the direction on behalf of Northwest RiverPartners and all the utilities, ports, agriculture, et cetera, that we represent on, how this council should recommend what Bonneville does with their fish and wildlife mitigation funding. And it just, when I think about that, it feels crazy. But at the same time, I feel so grateful to have been part of that process, to happen to get promoted to this role, frankly, right when that was starting. I mean, it only comes up every 5 years, right? So any other time that transition may have happened wouldn't have happened right as that started off. But it just, the timing of it couldn't have been better. And I think that experience has really, again, changed me in such a positive way. I really appreciated that.
Yeah, well, you did a great job on that, and obviously your work and working with our members and working with the council and the staff led to some really important wins, including taking the provisions on August spill out of the program and some other pieces. So great job on that. Victor put together a series of rapid fire questions. And then some more funny questions at the end. So I'm gonna actually ask Victor to go through some of the shorter questions here.
We
in our long script here.
We did tell you it was going to be a little different. All right, here he goes. Let's start. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Okay. Are you more of a morning person or a night owl?
Used to be a night owl. I'm now a morning person. It's a rough adjustment, though.
I saw that Facebook post of all the fireworks.
Yeah.
What is your favorite dam to talk about?
Oh, I'm trying to answer that quickly, but I had a really fun time at the Dalles the other day. It's the second time I've done the Dalles. The reason I think it's so fun to talk about is just because of the massive size of it. The size of that powerhouse. I know this is rapid fire. I'm just trying to get this off.
No.
But when you stand in there, and I think they said it's a mile, maybe a mile and a half long from end to end. I mean, that just, it melts your brain. So that's probably the one for me.
Yeah.
Okay. What about when you're driving? I mean, everybody knows that we do a lot of driving in this organization. Do you prefer podcast or music while you're driving?
Music until I can't listen to it anymore, and then podcasts until I can't listen to them anymore. And I alternate. It really depends on the length of the drive, but like the 10-hour drive to Montana a few months ago, it was a lot of back and forth. And then also you have to factor in whenever we're out of cell range, I have to go off of what's downloaded, which is usually music.
That's a fair balance. What about right now, summer's here, windows down or AC?
I would say more so AC, at least in Vancouver, right? I used to be more of a windows down guy when we lived, in a more rural area, but I feel like the joy of the windows down is greatly dictated by your surroundings. So,
All right. How about funniest hotel experience?
this is a good one. This did not happen at this job. So at my old job at the magazine, I covered a race in, well, the closest town people will recognize would be Morgantown, West Virginia. The best way to get to Morgantown is to fly into Pittsburgh and drive an hour and a half or so south. So when I'm booking all this up, I get a recommendation from my coworker. He says, one of the great things about the Pittsburgh airport you'll love is that after the race is over, you can leave the race, do the hour and a half drive back, and then there's a hotel with a sky bridge that goes straight to the airport security line. So you can get up in the morning, you can walk straight downstairs, and you can go there. And that was great because the flights that we were getting, the cross-country flights, I think that one, I had to be down there at 4 something in the morning, and that's East Coast time. So for me, this is like getting up like 1 in the morning.
Yeah.
Because I'm only there for usually 48 hours or less. So he's like, it's super easy. Like, you don't have to drive around, nothing like that. Well, I wake up at this ridiculously early time at this airport hotel to get ready for my flight. And I think I only gave myself like 15 minutes of grace. Like, I just need to basically, get cleaned up, get dressed, and go downstairs and take this plane home. I'm in the shower. I've got like 10 minutes until I need to hop in security. And I hear this like thing going off. And I'm like, what in the world is happening? So I peek out and I look, and the fire alarm is going off as I'm like in the shower. And I'm like, well, this is a really inconvenient time for a fire alarm to go off because I can't exactly just run out of here right now. But I like wrap that up. I put on clothes as quickly as I can. And I'm like, do I take the elevator? Do I take the stairs? Like, how do I get out of here? Even because if there's a fire, like I probably shouldn't be hopping in the elevator. But I finally just like, all right, I'm just going down the stairs, whatever. And I basically just book it out of there. I don't know how funny this is for other people, but for me, I remember like leaving there and being like, I don't know if that was legit or not, but it's someone else's problem now. I'm going home.
Yeah, you're getting on that plane.
It's too early, and I'm not sticking around to figure out what this deal is. I'm just getting out of here.
Bless you guys.
Yeah, good luck with that fire or not fire. I don't know why it's going off, but I'm out. And to this day, I have no idea. I just left.
Okay, now I kind of want to.
That's
Google
my cue to go.
The hotel's still there. Just curious.
Yeah.
Okay, let's jump to really quick. Would you rather's? Alrighty, and I know again the first one hits home. Give a presentation to 500 students, or answer questions from a very skeptical reporter.
I think I'll take the skeptical reporter. I've done some presentations to students. They can be a fun bunch, but they can also be a really intimidating bunch.
Depends on the grade.
Yeah, for sure. They can, they can really make you. When you have kids falling asleep during your presentation, it really makes
It's always
you like,
tough.
yeah. I've never had an adult fall asleep.
Helps the ego too.
So I enjoy the challenging conversations. I'd much rather welcome that.
Alrighty. Be stuck in a conference for a week or an airport for a day.
Conference. Yeah, I've done so many airports at this point. I've had some airport experiences that have made me. I mean, if you're ever wondering, like, man, why is he driving to that? Like, if I really don't need to fly, or if flying's not the preferred option, I'll skip the airport experience all day.
Oh yeah, I'm into that one. All right, so my last one, and I'm gonna hold you to this one. Wear a fish costume for salmon outreach, or a giant light bulb costume for energy outreach.
I think the fish should be fun. I'll take the fish.
You heard him. You guys heard him here. So
Send your fish costumes.
yes, we need to get. I heard that was a volunteer moment right there.
There you go. So Austin, you know what's coming here to end the podcast.
Oh yeah.
And you have been asking your guests this, I think, almost since the start of your podcast journey. So we're expecting something very meaningful. I'll hand it over to Victor to ask the question.
Just like you ask your guests, what is one piece of life or professional advice you would offer to the audience?
I have such an unfair advantage in this seat because, as you said, I've got to put people on the spot for, 3 years. And so you get a lot of time to internalize, like, what would I say if somebody asked me that question? So full disclosure, I've had time to think about this, and I assumed this question was probably coming. The only question I probably assumed out of everything today. But, the way that I pitch that question to people is always very open-ended. And one of the things I say is it could be something that you live by now or something you've lived by your whole life. It could be something you just recently discovered. And I just stumbled across this guy. It's hard to describe this to folks who don't know what I'm talking about, but there's this guy I found on YouTube because I for my whole time that I lived in my apartment and was at this job for basically 5 years, I refused to pay for streaming TV. I was too stubborn about it. So all my entertainment I just got from YouTube. And you guys actually brought up the point that I have some stuff floating around on YouTube myself.
Yeah.
I come across this guy. He's a guy who's like basically a tree faller up on Vancouver Island. Just this goofy Canadian guy. His name is Buckin' Billy Ray Smith. But at first I was entertained by it because I did a lot of stuff at my grandparents' growing up, messing around in the woods. You'd have trees fall during a storm. You had to cut them up and chop them up and turn them into firewood and all that. So it's just like, it's something that I've always enjoyed. It's just something that interested me. So when I saw it come up, I was like, yeah, I'll check it out. Well, the guy's, he's got a really cool story. He's got a great personality. He wouldn't have a big following on YouTube cutting down trees if he wasn't, somewhat entertaining. And he closes out all his videos with this same saying. He says, work hard, be honest, and be kind. And it's so stupid simple. But those 3 things I think are so valuable. And I've really taken, just when I think about it, I'm like, that's all it needs to be, right? I mean, just do your best work. Do it honestly in our job. That's so important, right? Just be honest, be transparent, and be kind to people. And when you talk about like talking to a reporter who's skeptical, we get skepticism all the time in what we do. We run into people who they don't believe us. They don't like what we have to say. They've got a preconceived notion about the issues that we're talking about. A lot of times I find, just being kind to those people, treating them like people rather than, jabbing back at them. Once they soften up a little bit, you can really have a conversation. And I'm not saying you're going to change their mind, but I think that goes so far. So to me in life, I think that's great career advice. It's great personal advice. Just do your best work, be an honest person, and be a kind person. The other thing I'll just say, a second piece of advice, but I think it feeds into this, is I've for I guess a long time. So I have my more recent advice, and I have my kind of long-standing advice. But there was an athlete that I looked up to in racing who, was really strong about just belief, and basically said if you believe in yourself 100%, you remove all doubt. That's when you really achieve great things. And I've found so often for myself, if I just kind of point myself at whatever I determine to be is my North Star, right? If I say for example, if I say I'm gonna go work at a motocross magazine, or I'm gonna do public affairs in the public utility sector or whatever, if I point myself out and I really dedicate that, and I don't have any doubt about it, I know that I can get there and I can achieve that. And I've done that competitively in my own, sports and racing and everything outside of work. I feel like I've applied that a lot to my work as well. And a lot of times the things that don't work out for me are the things where I find, I didn't believe in myself. I had too many questions going into it. Those are the things where sometimes you got to reevaluate. Sometimes those doubts clue you in on the fact that you're not doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And you need to adjust your expectations or your goals or whatever. But I would say that's the biggest thing is it's really important to have that spirit within yourself to say, I can commit myself 100% to something and be confident that I will achieve what I want to achieve. And I think, again, that has led me to so many great things in my life. And sometimes when I get off that path and I'm not doing what I need to do, when I'm not thinking in that kind of way, and I'm again having too much doubt, that's when I feel like I'm spinning my wheels. And sometimes you just gotta have an internal heart-to-heart with yourself and figure out what you need to get through that. So those are my two pieces of advice.
I think you hit the mark.
Yeah.
For good advice.
For sure. I like the simplicity of it too.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be this big, elaborate, just work hard, be honest, be kind. I like it.
Absolutely.
There's another thing, just I guess a bonus piece of advice I'll give you, but there's another thing that guy said that I thought was really, really interesting, and it wasn't even something he came up with. It was something that he said he was, given to him, but the saying was something to the effect of you spend the first 40 years of your career making your name, and you spend the second 40 years living off of it. And I just thought that was a cool one. It's you put in your work and you do what you got to do, and you can earn great things for yourself. So I think working hard never has really done anybody too bad in their life. So
for sure,
simple as that.
Thank you, Austin.
Yeah, it's some really good stuff. So how did it feel being on that side of the mic?
People always are apprehensive to do this podcast. A lot of times they're afraid. They're like, I don't think I could talk for an hour and a half. That's, But eventually you warm them up to it and they do it. And then when you get to the end of the conversation, I think the feedback that I get the most consistently is, wow, that went really fast. And for me, it doesn't feel that way so much, partly because I'll sit here and I'll really watch this clock and make sure, are we on time? Are we going too fast, too slow? I mean, I really have to dictate, as the host, I have to dictate the pace. Mm-hmm. Sitting here now, and I'm looking at we're at, an hour and 4. I mean, this flew by for me. So yeah. I guess, the experience rings true. Like when you're in this seat, these conversations feel like they're 20 minutes long.
Yeah.
Flew by for me too.
No, for sure. I know. I was looking at okay, we should can we move on to the next questions? I think, I'm proposing that we should have team episodes, follow-ups maybe in a couple of years for Austin and Clark.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Be
Yeah.
great.
Life goes on. We got new things to talk about.
Of course.
Absolutely.
And, just new updates and see where life is taking us at that point.
Absolutely. Amen to that. And also, hopefully nobody heard, but I think there's been a fly in here literally the entire time we've been recording this. So
I don't think
it'll be
heard
interesting.
But I'm going deaf at my older age. So
Yeah. It's like, oh man, it's just the noise that I'm hearing. It's cool.
I'm just going to be transparent for the listeners at home that this whole time I've been like, it's been extra apparent to me that there's some kind of insect over here.
That's funny.
That's a professional podcast host right there.
That's right.
Well, I just want to thank Victor for bringing this idea forward and the ability to actually do it. It took a little doing to get this done. And again, I want to thank Austin for taking the time, being open to it. A little different forecast or format for the podcast today. We really appreciate that. And it really was fantastic to have the podcast come full circle and interview Austin. He's done a fantastic job bringing the podcast to life, bringing all of these stories to our listeners and to share all the multiple different stories and perspectives on Northwest Hydropower has been great. And like Austin always does, that's where you come in, because we want to know what you thought of today's episode. If you have ideas of topics or people that we should cover here for Austin, the pro, to interview, not amateur hour here with Victor and I, please send those over. So please head over to nwriverpartners.org and send a message through our contact form. Or if you'd rather just email us directly, you can email us at info@nwriverpartners.org. That's info@nwriverpartners.org. And share the podcast with your family and friends. We want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to hear this, not only because of this episode with Austin, but for all the great stories that Austin brings to us through this podcast. And yes, leave a 5-star rating if you can. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and make sure to follow us on all of the social channels, including Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And I think with that, thanks Austin for joining us. And that's it for this episode of Damn.
Thank you all for listening. Thanks for believing in this thing for the last 3 years. And thanks to you both for making the time and doing it. Really appreciate it.
This is fun. Thank you.
Hope people were entertained.